Peace in, love out, namaste. How are you feeling today, Sangha? Welcome to Mindful Ethics. This is our weekly Dharma study, a course on how we can live more mindfully, right? Mindful guidance. We could all use a little bit more of that as we're navigating down this path. And so today's course, we're going to be talking about how you are treating other people, right? In our day-to-day life, when we're building our businesses, when we're going about in our communities, we may lose sight of how we are treating people. We may lose sight of how we're treating those who are in positions of authority above us. We may be mistreating those in positions underneath our authority. And so how do we maintain a sense of balance through all of that? And so I'm so glad for you to be joining me here as a part of this teaching of living more mindfully. And so the question that is going to be our prompt and our thesis today is, how have you been treating people over the past week? And so I just want you to take a moment to inventory your life as we do a grounding practice, to think about how you have been treating people over the past week. Have you been treating them with kindness? Have you been treating them with empathy? Or have you just been ravaged by your own feelings and your own thoughts and just kind of saying all these unprocessed things, right? Unfiltered, unvarnished, right? 100% just saying whatever you are thinking. Are you using someone as your verbal punching bag? And the verse today from our teaching of the Dharma is going to remind us of why that may not necessarily be so skillful. So let's take a moment to ground ourselves as we consider, how have you been treating people over the past week? Coming into an upright and comfortable seated position, closing your eyes if it's safe and comfortable to do so, taking a deep breath in and out as we settle into our practice. And over the last week, how have you been treating people? Is it with kindness? Is it with gentleness? Is it with respect? Is it with care? Or have you been unnecessarily harsh, vindictive, rude, condescending? There are a number of ways that we can respond in life, but the invitation of our practice is to respond more mindfully. So coming in to take one more breath in to seal our practice. Inhale and release. Okay, nicely done for our grounding practice, grounding exercise as we prepare for the rest of our Dharma study. So let's turn our attention to our Dharma verse for today. And so for those of you who may be new or unfamiliar with the Dharma and with the teachings which support mindfulness, I want to take a moment to orient you to them. So mindfulness arises not alone, not by itself, but as a series of teachings, right? It emerges with a teaching on compassion, on wisdom, on not extending harm or ahimsa, on a variety of things. And so this entire canon of thought is something that we reference as the Dharma, or this way, the middle way, a path to awakening the heart. And so that's what we use and what we call the Dharma, this series of teachings of awakening the heart and illuminating the mind to this boundless sense. This specific verses that we are reading today is from an early book about the teaching known as the Dhammapada. And so the Dhammapada is a book about the Dharma, about these teachings. And it uses a variety of illustrations that took place or that are said to have taken place. And the one thing that we have to remember about the Dhammapada and the Dharma and these things that we're reading is that they're meant to help orient us towards something. It may not necessarily be factual, actual descriptions of what took place specifically, because some of these teachings, they were written hundreds, maybe even thousands of years after the event was said to occur. And so we have to remember that we take it as a way to orient ourselves, but not necessarily as a teaching of this is an encyclopedic account of what took place, right? And so this is where we begin. And so we're going to start right now with verse 137 from the Dhammapada. We just call it the Dharma, right? Because there's a variety of teachings. This is one of them. And so this is where we'll begin, in verse 137. And it says, "One who inflicts violence on those who are unarmed and offends those who are inoffensive will soon come upon one of these 10 states." And so this verse is foreshadowing what is to come, the consequences of unwise or unskillful action. And it's so important that we remember that this universe that we live in, the reality that we live in, it is one of cause and effect, of conditionality. That if you have the proper conditions that exist, the proper circumstances that exist, the result will effectuate or take place. That there is a cause and that there is an effect, right? And that there is a relationship between the two, right? That one doesn't go unaddressed. And so some of you may be familiar with the concept of karma, something for something, right? That if there is a cause, the result will take place. Now, a lot of us, oftentimes we think about this as some sort of universal retribution, right? That the universe is just out there just getting even with people every day. But really, karma is more of a reference to those conditions that exist. That if those conditions exist, right, within our hearts, within our minds, within our lives, then the result will take place. And so I just want to help remind you of that if you are in a work environment and you are starting your business and you are creating an atmosphere where people are being shouted at, yelled at, or screamed at, or people are being physically or verbally assaulted, right? Where there is not a sense of safety and team cohesion, that can be detrimental, right? That creates a hostile work environment, that creates a place that is not conducive to long-term sustainability. You cannot sustain that for a long time. There was a time, in our past where they would have just said that's somebody's business. That's what they can do. Now the state will intervene in those situations. OSHA will be called on. Hotlines and whistleblower lines are set up just for these type of occurrences. And so as a mindful business owner, as a mindful leader, as a mindful professional or executive, you have to remember that you have to constantly remember to operate from a place of integrity, right? From a place of wisdom, from a place of skillful compassion. And we want to do that. Why? Because the teaching right here already foreshadows that if you create these hostile conditions, if you establish an order of hostility within your life, then these results will take place. And it gives you 1 of 10. Now, some of these are going to be like, really? That's going to seem like a bit overwhelming. But what it's saying is that it's really creating conditions that are detrimental to your life. And so let's get into it. Let's see what the teaching says in verse 138 through 140 about what could potentially happen. And so it says, a sharp pain could be caused, disaster, bodily injury, serious illness, derangement of mind, trouble from the government, grave charges, loss of relatives, loss of wealth, house destroyed by a ravaging fire. Upon dissolution of the body, the ignorant is reborn in hell consciousness. Whew. That is heavy. So let's unpack it just a little bit, just to see what it kind of means. And so it's important to remember that we look at this text, one, symbolically, right? That we don't necessarily have to think about this as a literal account of what will take place, but it is that what could be emotionally created, mentally created, right? This type of anguish that is created from extending harm or violence. towards others. And so the first one says sharp pain. We all know what it's like to feel tension, tightness, clinging in our lives. It could be alluding to, chest pain, right? If you think that if you could just yell at someone all day and just berate someone all day and think that you'll only feel good about it, I'm here to tell you that eventually it catches up to you. Your mistreatment catches up to you. That retribution, it builds that karmic order, that storehouse consciousness. It builds, it builds, it builds, it builds. And so it says that sharp pain, right? Tightness, tension, clinging, right? That can be a result of your actions. Disaster, right? Disaster. If you keep mistreating people, if you keep doing violence to someone, eventually the disaster will take place. Something that you did not expect will happen. And I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that if you're abusing people, eventually it catches up, right? Bodily injury, right? That if you are engaging in violence, physically, emotionally, verbally, eventually someone's going to get hurt, and hurt profoundly. Serious illness, that goes back to this tension, tightness, clinging, right? Your heart rate increases, your blood pressure increases when you're creating these hostile work environments. It's not good for your health, and serious injury and illness could occur because of this. A derangement of mind, this not being settled, this not being able to sleep at night. So many people who are powerful people are not able to sleep well at night because of the mistreatment that they have towards others, because they're not treating other people with dignity and humanity. They are not able to get a good night's sleep. And so if you find yourself not able to get a good night's sleep and you're in a position of leadership, you need to be asking yourself, how are you treating people every day? Not just those in social circles that are in positions of authority over you, but also people who are under the authority of your influence as well. The next one, loss of relatives, right? We can start pushing relatives away. We can start pushing those that we love away because we can be so hostile with our words, right? Our words, our actions, they can be so displeasing to those who are around us that that they don't want any part of it, right? They don't want any of it. You become like a toxic person, and they don't want to be around that toxicity. And so wherever you are, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have to bring yourself back into balance, right? Bring yourself back into balance. Loss of wealth. And sometimes people think that mindfulness or dharma or meditation, that means only poverty. But you have to remember these two things, that there were two paths, right? There was a path for those who were renouncing life and becoming monks, and they were giving up worldly possessions. And then there were lay individuals, right? Householders, as they were referred to. And these were people who lived in the community, who were creating businesses, who had families, and they were going on with their life. And if they were going on with their life, and if they were living, in the city, then they weren't required to renounce their wealth. They were not required to give up their possessions. As a matter of fact, it was encouraged that they grow their wealth and increase their wealth so that they could then practice generosity to help support the monastery, to help support these teachings. And so if you're not becoming a monk, you are encouraged to grow your wealth in a skillful and wise way, right? So that you could also practice generosity. And so this teaching is saying that if you are using harsh language, right? If you are extending violence, if you are trying to offend everybody, you could lose your wealth, right? What you've built, what you've been working towards. And so you have to remind yourself to slow down, find this sense of balance. Next, it can be, the final one is the house could be destroyed by a ravaging fire. And so a lot of times this teaching alludes to passion, right? Passion being a fire that just envelops everything. And so if your passions over something, over a situation, over getting even, all these sorts of things, if they consume you, your whole home can be caught up in these flames. And so it's pointing to that everything that you, within your environment, everything in your sphere gets touched by this, right? Nothing gets left out. And so everything can be consumed, everything can be brought down. So if you're extending violence, if you're using harsh language, you're trying to offend all the time, you have to watch out, because all these potential things could happen, right? This could be your karma. This could be your result. And so remember that, all right? And so what's the reminder of the teaching, right? What's the takeaway for this mindful ethics class and our Dharma study today? Well, it is this. It is remember to mindfully choose how you respond, right? That you're not just called to react. You're not just called to just say whatever you're feeling without processing it, right? You're not just meant to use someone else as your verbal punching bag just because that's the way you feel. What you are called to do is to take inventory of what's here and skillfully express it, right? You don't tell someone, I hate you, just because that's what you're feeling at the moment. That may not be exactly what you intend, but that just may be a mental state that you are in at the present moment. And so you want to be skillful about how you respond. You want to be skillful about how you are talking to your direct reports, your staff, your employees, that you're not just saying something that will have a lasting impression simply because that is how you are feeling at a moment, right? And I know we're in a society which is saying, just say whatever you want, just just be totally 100% transparent and authentic. But if it is unprocessed, is that really you? Because when you wake up tomorrow, are you going to have a regret about what you said today, right? When you wake up a week from now, will you be able to sleep because of what you said today? The words that you say, they have a long, long trail, and you want to be mindful and skillful about how you go about and to say them. All right. So that is our Dharma study for today. I really appreciate you for joining me today. Let's just take a moment to center ourselves as we prepare to release. Coming into an upright and comfortable seated position, closing your eyes if it's safe and comfortable to do so. Taking a deep breath in and out to settle into your practice. May you choose this week to find the strength and the clarity and the wisdom to choose to respond in skillful and wise ways instead of harsh and violent ways within your life, within your sphere, within your community. Taking a deep breath in to seal our practice. Inhale and release. Well practiced, Sangha. I'll see you back here next week for another Dharma study and mindful ethics teaching. Namaste.